coming up on The World Today. Kenya's top election official announces William Ruto as winner of the presidential election with 50.49% of the votes. Japan and South Korea mark anniversary of its surrender in World War II. And Taliban marks Afghan Independence Day. Hello, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. I'm Millicent Walker. We begin with the trending news this hour. About an hour ago, Kenya's Vice President William Ruto became the country's 5th president, having won last Tuesday's presidential election, the 6th day today. Well, the announcements this afternoon put an end to anxious wait for the election results, with fears the polls may have been rigged. Ruto won 50.49% of votes, while his closest competitor, Raila Odinga, won 48.85%. Trailing far behind were George Wajakoyand, David Muare. Both candidates took less than 1% combined. Some 14 million people voted, giving a turnout of 65%.
Be those of us who will oversee what we do in the executive. Both responsibilities in government and in the opposition are important for the people of Kenya. I want to promise the people of Kenya that I will run a transparent, open, democratic government. And I will work with the opposition to the extent that they provide oversight over my administration. Let me also, at this point in time, acknowledge my boss, the President of the Republic of Kenya. His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, who has worked with me over the last 10 years in various forms. And I want to commit to the people of Kenya that I will build on the foundation that President Kenyatta and I put together and take this country to the next level. I want to promise all the people of Kenya, whichever way they voted, that this will be their government. I know many are wondering, especially those who have done many things against us. I want to tell them that they have nothing to fear. There is no room. There is nothing. There is no room for vengeance. There is no room for looking back. We are looking into the future. I am acutely aware that our country is at a stage where we need all hands on deck to move it forward. We do not have the luxury to look back. We do not have the luxury to point fingers. We do not have the luxury to apportion blame. We must close ranks and work together for a functioning, democratic, prosperous Kenya. I want to thank the members of my team, starting with my wife and family. And many other prayer warriors in Kenya. And I want to confess that I have been prayed into victory. It is not our effort. And my team knows. We were working against the odds, many odds at that. But I must confess that it is God who brought us this victory. I do not want to mention the many people, many friends who have been part and parcel of this journey. Many people have paid huge sacrifices for us to get here. I want to promise them that their sacrifice will not be in vain.
President-elect speaking shortly after the announcement a short while ago. Meanwhile, Mr. William Ruto received his certificate of return shortly after his speech this afternoon and raised it in display to supporters for the cameras to see as well. Moments after Mr. Ruto was announced winner of the presidential election, African leaders sent in their congratulations. The latest being Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who tweeted congratulations to @William Ruto on his election as the next president of Kenya. He says, "I have no doubt he will serve his country, his people, and the continent with distinction." Also, the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed also congratulated President-elect Ruto. He also tweeted, "My congratulations, William Ruto, on your election as the President of the Republic of Kenya. I wish you best of luck in your endeavors ahead, and we look forward to working closely with you on common bilateral and regional interests." So let's tell you a bit about the man, William Ruto. This is his first attempt at the presidency, and he has succeeded. Perhaps this is the same luck that saw him elected at his first attempt at parliament in 1997 as MP for the Eldoret North constituency. The 55-year-old portrayed himself as the champion of the poor, as his childhood epitomizes the lives of many poor Kenyans. He went to primary school barefoot, wearing his first pair of shoes at the age of 15. He also sold chicken and groundnuts by the roadside in rural areas of the Rift Valley. His powerful oratory, ferocious work ethic, quick wits propelled him into politics, where he became a lawmaker at the age of 31 and a minister at 36. He painted the election as a clash between hustlers and dynasties, a jab at Raila Odinga and Kenyatta, son of the nation's first vice president and president, respectively. He's therefore coined the phrase "hustler nation" to refer to the young people struggling to make ends meet. Mr. Ruto contested the election under the banner of Kenya Kwanza, Swahili for Kenya First, with a promise to grow the economy. The official rate of unemployment among those aged between 18 and 34 years is nearly 40%. And the economy is not creating enough jobs to absorb the 800,000 young people joining the workforce every year. Mr. Ruto has promised to publish government contracts with China and deport undocumented Chinese nationals if elected. He's also promised promises that are likely to resonate with citizens pummeled by mounting debt and skyrocketing cost of living. And now, as Kenya's fifth president, he faces issues of corruption, COVID-19 pandemic-related economic slowdown, weakened consumer spending that has led to rising unemployment and also poverty. Well, joining us for more on the latest, the Kenyan journalist with the mood in Kenya, Abby Agena joins me now. Abby, thank you for joining us. What's the mood following ICBC's announcement of William Ruto as winner of the presidential election?
Well, thank you for having me. It's a beehive of activity in the capital city of Kenya. Here in Nairobi, we have seen protests by some of the supporters of the Azimio la Umoja candidate, Raila Odinga, and similar protests have also been reported in the town city of Kisumu, where, as we speak right now, police are engaging in running battles with protesters, even as they seek to push out their frustrations with the results. A majority of the voters from Raila Odinga's political strongholds have disputed the election results, saying that they feel their victory was stolen. But on the flip side, from the backyard of the president-elect, Dr. William Ruto, there are celebrations galore. We are seeing mammoth crowds of people on the streets celebrating the recent results, as well as in central Kenya, where the deputy president-elect comes from. We've also seen quite a number of celebrations with various supporters coming out jubilantly celebrating the just released results, which had gripped the country's attention. The country was literally at a standstill. Majority of the shops had closed. There are no people since the voting day. It was 6 days since they have been waiting. But today there's a sense of relief in some parts of the country, whereas in others we are still getting more reports of tear gas as well as bonfires, even as they continue to relate with the recent results that have just been released.
Indeed, and Abby, you know, the recent report about the 4 election commissioners saying that they could not support what they call opaque vote count before the announcement, raising so many questions as to what will happen next. But then we heard the president-elect, Mr. Ruto, say there are no losers, asking for all hands to be on deck at this point. What are you hearing from the opposition camp, in this case, Raila Odinga?
Well, the Odinga camp has retreated. We've not had any statement from his team yet, but we do know that from the communication secretariat that they have confirmed that they'll be issuing a press conference tomorrow to cite some of the issues that they have had. We did see the chief agent of the presidential aspirant, Raila Odinga, that is Saitao Olekanchori, who was at the Bomas of Kenya. He was furious. He was disputing the tallied results, saying that there were irregularities, making allegations around the figures. As of now, we can also say that the 4 commissioners who have come out did issue their press statement, where they did indicate that the credibility of the results was in question. And all this perhaps might see the Odinga camp consider going to the Supreme Court to challenge the election outcome, which the Odinga camp is raising glaring concerns in terms of the tallied numbers that they've been able to compute as of this day.
And Abby, before we let you go, I know that you have covered elections in the country previous and then this one. Is this like deja vu, seeing as, you know, you explained some of the chaos that emerged just before the declaration of this by the Electoral Commission?
Well, the unique aspect around this election is not, if you look back at the year 2007, where we had a very, very ugly scene. We are not seeing something of that nature yet. We are seeing protesters just basically blocking the roads, carrying twigs, chanting Odinga slogans, saying that they really feel antagonized by the election outcome. We've not seen any cases of break-ins, as was witnessed in 2007. We've not seen cases of cars being stoned, cars being burnt, or people taking machetes to take on their fellow neighbors. We've not seen any such scenes, and we are likely to see a more relaxed, a more reconciliatory tone coming out from the president-elect, who in his speech he did indicate that he is willing to work with both sides of the camp, and he did strike indeed a reconciliatory message, saying that he has forgiven those who tormented him, and saying that it's not time for revenge, but it's time to move the country forward into the future. So it's not really a deja vu. We are simply seeing people ventilating on the streets with the election outcome, and basically people are really concerned with the fact that 4 commissioners had expressed concerns about the accuracy of the results that have been coming out of this hotly contested election. A margin of just about 200,000 votes, where President-elect William Ruto did bag close to 7.1 million votes. And this has, of course, gotten the attention of the country, really, in regards to the numbers, considering the Azimio candidate, Raila Odinga, secured 6.9 million votes. So this is indeed promising to be an interesting week for Kenyans as well as East Africans, although we've already seen some congratulatory messages coming from the various presidents within the continent.
Journalists, thank you so much. We do hope things continue to remain safe. Well, away from Kenya to Egypt, where dozens of victims of a church fire there killed during Sunday Mass have been laid to rest. Over 40 lives were lost in the blaze. Many of them are said to be mostly children. Relatives of the fallen attended a mass funeral in Egypt's second-largest city of Giza. Coffins were passed through the church so that families could grieve and pray for the deceased. About 1,000 people had been gathered for a Sunday Mass at the Abu Sifin church when the fire began. Sources say the fire blocked an entrance to the church, causing a stampede. And a national holiday has been declared in Afghanistan as the Taliban authorities mark the first anniversary of seizing power in Kabul. Taliban members and supporters have been parading in the streets, hanging black and white flags, but the anniversary comes during a deepening economic and humanitarian crisis, with many men unable to find work and most girls' secondary schools still closed. The Taliban's main spokesman says that some religious leaders are opposed to the idea of girls going to school, but they are trying to find a solution. Roughly 25 million Afghans are now living in poverty, well over half the population, and the UN estimates that up to 900,000 jobs could be lost this year as the economy stalls. The country is safer than it was when the hardline Islamist movement was fighting against US-led foreign forces and their Afghan allies, although a local offshoot of Islamic State has carried out several attacks. Now, the fall of Kabul on 15 August 2021 followed the United States' decision to pull troops out of the country by September that year. There were desperate scenes at Kabul airport as thousands of people tried to escape, even clinging to planes as they attempted to take off. But one of the most shocking aspects of the Taliban's offensive was how quickly Kabul and with it Afghanistan fell. Now, to a brief outlook of what led to that moment and what happened over the following period. On the 14th of April, the US President Joe Biden announced his troops will withdraw from Afghanistan in the coming weeks, bringing America's longest war to a close. 2 months later, Afghan government officials said fighting was raging in 26 of the country's 34 provinces. July the 2nd, US troops quietly pulled out main military Bagram Air Base there, just an hour's drive from Kabul. On the 14th of August, the Taliban, now in control of more than half of Afghanistan's districts, they took the major northern city of Mazar-i-Sharif, and with little resistance, Pur al-Am, the capital of Logar, 14 miles south of Kabul. The very next day, the eastern city of Jalalabad was taken without a fight, and later that day, the Taliban entered Kabul and former President Ghani fled the country. Of course, we later saw a picture shared showing the insurgents behind Ghani's desk at the presidential palace. And much later, there were videos that surfaced, appeared to show people falling to their deaths after clinging to a C-17 jet as they took off from Kabul airport in a bid to flee an Afghanistan ruled by the Taliban. Before the 31st of July deadline, the U.S. finished the withdrawal of American citizens from Afghanistan. The UK also announced its last military flight left the country. For the Taliban, today marks their independence, the culmination of their insurgency against US-led international forces and the former government. So to come on the program, we'll be talking to an analyst on today's Afghan sort of Independence Day. Plus, we also have India celebrating years of independence from British rule, with events planned across the country and missions abroad. Stay with us. Welcome back. Dimitropoulos, security analyst, joins me now on Taliban's 1 year in Afghanistan. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. For the Taliban, the culmination of their insurgency, they're calling today against US-led international forces and the former government. How would you assess their role?
I think it's just 1 year ago that we saw the rapid change in the affairs of Afghanistan. You know, we saw how over a period of 10 days they took over. And again, they returned back to the normal way of their strict kind of Islam that they normally practice. You know, the 38.9 million people that live in that part of the world are now going through all kinds of things. It's unfortunate that it had to be like that. And there are lessons that need to be learned by the world in terms of how, you know, the US-led collusion for over 20 years, or for about 20 years plus, collapsed suddenly overnight. And we are now reaping the outcome of that situation right now. 1 year counting, we've seen a lot of changes. You know, we've seen women, you know, being asked to give their jobs to their brothers, you know, to leave their job. We've seen children unable, or girls unable to go back to school. That is the reality on the ground for the Afghan. You know, a lot of people are suffering in that country at the moment, and there's a backlash in terms of, you know, the population's perspective of the Taliban that is ruling that country.
Many other Afghans, you know, have talked about the direction which the country has been taking. Some of them are lamenting continued closure of most girls' secondary schools, and we also understand there's still heavy fighting in some parts of the country. But many wonder, is this something that will ever go away? And also, is it that it's all gloom for the past 365 days with the Taliban at the helm of affairs?
I think there are different perspectives, because, again, we need to understand that this is a very strict religious nation. Unlike many around the world, they have a very different practice. And if the 38.9 million population feel like this is what they want, who are we to say no? We know the ones that do not want this practice. Many of them manage to escape or leave the country. But a large number of people stay in that country, to the extent that about 20 million is reported to need, you know, support, you know, because of the food insecurity in the country at the moment. But I think what bothers me more is that these people practice more of a very strict Sunni kind of a religious doctrine. And the question that needs to be asked is, where are all the Muslim countries in terms of the support? You know, if, for example, I know the Americans, you know, were funding about the 5.5 billion, you know, budget that they had, 75% of it was being funded by foreign aid, and that was being, you know, withdrawn. You know, so what you will have expected is that most of the Muslim countries will have, you know, stand up to try and help, you know, this country, which is predominantly a Muslim country. But we've not seen that, and that calls into question, you know, what the Muslim world is doing to support, you know, Afghanistan, especially the people who are actually caught, you know, in this ongoing vicious cycle.
And we did see quite a number of things after the Taliban takeover. From September 2021, they announced the new interim government, which was all male. Dozens of women protested over the policies towards women. We also saw, you know, several attacks, some people who were killed during Friday prayers. We also understand the Taliban banned long-distance road trips for women. There was also women and girls ordered to wear hijab, even for television presenters, and some of them protested against that. But there was something the Taliban leader said in an exclusive interview, which was that his government would not allow armed groups to operate from its soil. And I know that, Mr. Olodo, we had this discussion. This is when the U.S. drone strike eliminated the al-Qaeda leader. It's also raised some concerns with the West in terms of if there is still perhaps a threat with these attacks that is taking place in the country to Western interests.
There is no doubt that the West have concerns about Afghanistan being a hotbed for Islamic jihadists. And there's no doubt, and it's an irony actually, that ISIS-K seems to be the biggest headache for the Taliban government because they tend to attack the Taliban government. And that, again, calls to question that, if Afghanistan, one of the most strictest, nation in terms of an Islamic nation, is actually being attacked by a jihadist group, then you ask the question, really, what is the objective there? Because these people, practice this religion, of course. So what you would have expected is that it should have been a place where there should be no form of even terrorist attack. But unfortunately, that's the situation. But again, it talks to the challenges the West have, because 11 years after Osama bin Laden was killed, we found out that his second in command was also killed in Afghanistan. So the question is, why is Afghanistan unable to disassociate themselves completely from Al-Qaeda? And that's because it's very difficult, it's very easy for that particular environment to be a recruiting ground, and that is where the West have problem with that. Afghanistan, the way it's structured, the way they do their things, they will become a breeding ground for Al-Qaeda and other jihadist groups. And of course, we notice a shift in the Americans' approach. More or less, they're not going to go down there and have boots on the ground, but they're going to use drones, which is more convenient, much cheaper, to go after those groups that they believe is a threat to American interests and the American state.
U.S. President Biden is also getting a backlash with the recent GOP reports. But we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Mr. Dimitropoulos is a security analyst. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, on the United States, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to China's Taiwan island and her intrigue with local leader Tsai Ing-wen, some experts have called it a political farce played by both sides to hijack the public attention. Teng Ju-Quinn, a researcher with China Institute of International Studies, said both Pelosi and the Sila Democratic Progressive Party are bent on seeking selfish interests. She said there's nothing democratic about this ill-intended trip. A TV commentator in Taiwan, Hao Shun-Hing, described the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan as pathetic. Meanwhile, the U.S. lawmaker delegation arrived Taiwan to meet the president, the second high-level group to come amid continued military tensions with the island's giant neighbor, China. Beijing, which claims democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory, has been holding military drills around the island to express its anger at this month's visit to Taipei by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The de facto U.S. embassy in Taipei said the delegation arrived on Sunday for the two-day visit, being led by Senator Ed Markey, who is being accompanied by 4 other lawmakers on what it described as part of a larger visit to the Indo-Pacific region. The de facto U.S. embassy said in a statement the delegation will meet the senior Taiwan leaders to discuss U.S.-Taiwan relations, regional security, trade and investment, global supply chains, climate change and other significant issues of mutual interest. Meanwhile, Beijing has today said that attempts to challenge the nation's one China principle was doomed to fail after the group of U.S. lawmakers visited Taiwan. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, he said that in order to avoid further damage to Sino-U.S. relations and the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait, China will take firm and forceful measures to safeguard the national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Joining us right now for more on the situation is a lawyer and also foreign affairs analyst, Michelle Agatishe. Thanks for joining us, Michelle. Thanks for your patience. I mean, it's another U.S. congressional delegation visit, but this time unannounced to Taiwan, 12 days after the tour by House Speaker. How should the world interpret this? Oh dear, we seem to be having challenges with our guests. Hopefully we'll try to reconnect on this issue. But let's take you to another part of Asia where today is a special day for several countries in the region, the 77th anniversary of the end of World War II. Japan, as a national memorial ceremony for the war dead, was scheduled with the Emperor, Empress, senior politicians, family members of the deceased in attendance. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also gave an address, as did South Korean President, who urged for improved ties with Japan, proposing a plan for the North.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has pledged never again to wage war on the anniversary of Japan's World War II surrender today. It was his first speech at the annual ceremony since taking office last October.
We will never again repeat the horrors of war. I will continue to live up to this determined oath. In a world where conflicts are still unabated, Japan, under the banner of proactive pacifism, will do its utmost to work together with the international community to resolve the various challenges facing the world.
During a national memorial service also attended by Japanese Emperor Naruhito, Prime Minister Kishida paid tribute to all who had lost their lives in the war, both on the battlefields and elsewhere, praying for world peace and for the continuing development of the country.
Looking back on the long period of post-war peace, reflecting on our past and bearing in mind the feelings of our deep remorse, I earnestly hope that the ravages of war will never again be repeated.
787 people attended the ceremony this year, including 592 family members of the victims of the war. Meanwhile, speaking at the ceremony to mark the 1945 end of Japan's colonial rule of the Korean Peninsula, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said the country must overcome historical disputes with Japan and achieve peace with North Korea as key steps towards bolstering the stability and security of the North Asian region. Yoon said Tokyo had become a partner in tackling threat to global freedom and urged both nations to overcome disputes dating to those days.
When Korea-Japan relations move towards a common future and when the mission of our times align based on our shared universal values, it will also help solve the historical problems. I am proposing my audacious plan that will significantly improve North Korea's economy and its people's livelihoods in stages if the North stops development of its nuclear program and embarks on a genuine and substantive denuclearization process.
Yoon, a conservative who took office in May, also repeated a promise to provide North Korea with wide-ranging aid if Pyongyang stopped development of its nuclear program and embarked on a genuine and substantive process of eliminating such weapons. The anniversary commemoration is coming amid Russia's nearly 6-month invasion of Ukraine and mounting tensions between the U.S. and China over Taiwan.
Staying with the 77th anniversary of Japan's surrender, which ended World War II, thousands of Japanese residents and several politicians visited Tokyo's controversial Yasukuni Shrine. Despite the sultry heat, people started queuing from early morning to offer prayers in front of the shrine and jointly observed a moment of silence at noon. A small group of right-wing activists, some bearing flags, marched and chanted slogans there as well. Several politicians, including Economic Security Minister Sane Taichi, along with Koichi Haguda, the head of the Liberal Democratic Party's LDP Policy Research Council, and a key ally of slain former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also visited the site. Yasukuni is seen as a symbol of Japan's past militarism, honors the war dead, including 14 World War II leaders convicted by an Allied tribunal as Class A war criminals, hence making it a flashpoint for tensions with China and South Korea. Meanwhile, South Korean residents are taking part in a series of commemorative events for the International Memorial Day for Japanese Military Comfort Women. Sunday marked the International Day of Remembrance of victims of Japanese military's Comfort Women system. It is said that on August 14, 1991, the late Kim Hak-soon gave the first testimony about her horrible memories of when she was a sex slave for Japanese soldiers as a young girl, making public to the world the lies of the Japanese government. A courageous testimony was followed by the vivid memories of other survivors. Historians estimate that the number of comfort women, mostly women from the Korean peninsula, suffering under the 1910 to 1945 Japanese colonial rule is around 200,000. South Korea began observing the day as a National Memorial Day in 2018. So far, only 240 victims reported to the country's government, with only 11 among them currently alive. And still to come on the program. With flowers, dedication and love, Colombian flower producers prepare their traditional elaborate floral arrangement known as sietes ahead of Medellin's Grand Flower Parade. We stay with us. Welcome back, and just a recap of where we're headed. The U.S. lawmaker delegation that has arrived Taiwan for a two-day visit. Our guest is back with us, Michelle Agatisho, who's a foreign affairs analyst. Thanks, Michelle. Hope you can hear me this time. Talk to us about what the world should think about this visit, another U.S. congressional delegation visit to Taiwan.
Thank you very much, Millicent, for having me. Well, I think it's a time when the world is really on edge, because as we know, in the Indo-Pacific region, the Taiwan question has been a long-standing question, particularly as it relates to U.S.-China relations. We all know what happened when Nancy Pelosi, a couple of weeks ago, went to Taiwan, and we saw the, should I say, excessive reaction that the Chinese had, including of the military. And I understand that announcements have been made by the Chinese Defense Ministry as to the fact that they are going to also respond to this. So I believe that the world is on edge, and we really do not know what's going to happen resulting from this.
Now, at the time of her visit, you talked about China launching the military exercises around that. Many really wonder if there might be more of that, seeing as this is a position that the United States has taken. Another question also is this Congress as against perhaps a decision or visit that the White House might not be aware of? Like what's really happening? Is this a decision by, just lawmakers on their own without, the White House? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it appears to be the case. If you recall, in the backdrop of Nancy Pelosi's visit, I understand that there were back channels as well as communication with the White House, basically asking the White House to rein in Pelosi and prevent her from making that trip. And I understand that the White House also responded, first of all, trying to articulate the basis of U.S. governmental relations, particularly about separation of powers, and the fact that the Congress is its own arm of government and makes their own decisions. And that unlike in some countries, the White House, the presidency, cannot direct what the Congress will do. Now, of course, there are other questions that arise, including the fact that, well, Nancy Pelosi, as well as many of the representatives of Congress who went to Taiwan this time around, are members of the Democratic Party. And of course, there are also means within the Democratic Party that are available. But of course, right, it still just touches on the question of when domestic political affairs then spill over into the international scene. There have been some commentators in the United States who have analyzed this from the point of view that midterm elections in Congress are coming up, and that this might appear to be some kind of grandstanding on the foreign scene, such as to be able to get political capital on the domestic scene that will translate to votes for the midterm elections. As to the validity or veracity of that analysis is a different question altogether. One thing that remains clear is that the world is tethering on the edge, and indeed we're playing with fire.
We also know that the U.S. does not officially recognize Taiwan, and this is also except a few countries. I think Paraguay is one of those countries. But the UN also recognizes the One China principle. But some people say their voices have not been loud enough in this matter. Do you agree?
Yes. Well, I mean, it is the case that, the U.S. has for a long time maintained the One China principle, even though they maintain unofficial relations with Taiwan. Interestingly, it's actually part of U.S. law because there's a Taiwan Relations Act within the United States. And within the Taiwan Relations Act, also again, against the backdrop of Indo-Pacific peace in the Western Pacific, there is that recognition, right, that One China is recognized. There is no official recognition of Taiwan, and we're not advocating for the independence of Taiwan, but we'll provide arms and ammunition for the self-defense of Taiwan. That's what the law says. Now, question as to whether we want Taiwan to be independent or whether we want to advocate for that or not advocate for that, I feel opens a whole kettle of fish that I'm not sure that we want to deal with as a world right now. There are historical questions that arise, including the fact that historically there was in fact one China, and in fact the leadership of Taiwan, or rather the successors of the leadership of Taiwan once ruled China. And this is almost as the Chinese will see it as a breakaway. Of course, the other argument is the fact that, well, at least Taiwan maintains democratic principles and they are nearer in terms of values with the West, and as such, they should be supported. But we all know that you do not want to set international precedents in the context of specific issues. Why? Because those might then reinforce other arguments that you have. For example, people in Spain, the Catalans, may then say, well, you've recognized Taiwan. Surely you should also support our own push for independence. But others in other countries would also advocate that. So you don't want to get into that.
What do you think the UN should do in this case?
Well, I mean, the UN at this point in time, really, I don't know what they should do. And why I say I don't know is because we've not really gotten to the point where there is conflict that should justify them, wielding the big stick. But you also have to remember and recognize that China is a part of the UN Security Council. And as such, they have a veto power that they can exercise. You also have to recognize that Russia is a part of the UN Security Council, and Russia has actually been advocating that, well, America is trying to bully China and that they're going to support China in how they want to defend themselves. So the question, I think, that goes back to you and rather maybe back to academicians who would want to interrogate this issue is whether indeed the UN is the right forum that we should be looking toward resolving this, or whether we should have a more regional forum, maybe within the Indo-Pacific, that should look to that. And whether we should hold our breath is another question, particularly when you see, should I say, the distrust from Japan, South Korea, within that same region toward China at this point in time.
Well, one thing we all agree is we don't want the Russia-Ukraine situation again in this case. Thank you so much, Mitchell Agatishe is a lawyer, foreign affairs analyst. Thanks for joining us today.
It's always my pleasure, Nelson. Thank you so very much.
Go over to India. The country is aiming to become a developed nation within 25 years. That's according to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a National Day address, with policies to support domestic production in power, defense and digital technology. Speaking from the 17th century Red Fort in Delhi, as India celebrates its 75th year of independence from British colonial rule, Mr. Modi exhorted Indian youth to give their best years for the cause of the country. The World Bank currently categorizes India as a lower middle-income economy meant for countries with a gross national income per capita of between $1,086 and $4,255. High-income countries like the U.S. have a per capita income of over $13,000 or more. And in Nigeria, the Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria says trade and partnership between Nigeria and India has been impressive over the years, thereby cementing the relationship between the two countries as long-standing allies and partners in progress. Speaking to journalists at the embassy in Abuja to mark the independence anniversary of India, he says some of the areas of current partnership and trade with Nigeria are oil and gas, security, pharmaceuticals and information communications technology.
Along with our own development, we have also been ready and always available for our friends across the world to also develop simultaneously through the South-South cooperation that we have been part of, whether it is through the non-aligned movement or through various other high-tech and other movements that we had done and the operations that we had happened. So we are very happy to be here at this stage, and presently I am here in Nigeria. India-Nigeria relations are one of the best. We actually started our relationship with Nigeria even before independence of Nigeria in 1958, when we had established our office in Lagos. Since then, our relationship has developed in a multifarious way in almost in all places. Human capacity development is one of the more important areas in which we are concentrating, and we are very happy that with the assistance and the cooperation of the Nigerian government, successive Nigerian governments and the Indian government, we can now say that our relationship is very strong and very cordial. India is a major importer of oil from Nigeria. Nearly about $10 billion worth of oil is being imported from Nigeria. So that plus India also exports various issues from agricultural product to petroleum products to pharmaceuticals to textiles. So there is a large possibility of increasing this trade and economic cooperation between our two countries.
Well, still on India's independence, next door Pakistan also marked its independence Sunday with traditional flag-raising ceremonies and a cultural performance. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was seen hoisting the Pakistan flag inside the Dinar Convention Center in the capital, Islamabad, and made a speech in which he brought up slow growth in the nation. The South Asian nation gained independence from British rule following partition of colonial India into the independent nations, Hindu majority India and the Islamic Pakistan, at midnight on August 14th, 15th in 1947. Finally on the program, Colombian flower producers are preparing their traditional elaborate floral arrangement known as sietes ahead of the Medellin's Grand Flower Parade. The town of Santa Elena is known as a cradle of sietoras, the flower aficionados who create the sietes. Throughout the year, families grow the flowers they will later use on their sietes. For last year's Sietora Parade winner, Luis Felipe Londono says the art form is a tradition that has been in his family for over 3 generations. Quite colorful indeed. Well, that wraps up our program at this time. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good evening.